Graham Foster faces a bleak future on Emmerdale after being caught out, with one loved one telling him that he should have stayed dead. After several years away, it's not been the homecoming he expected. Graham returned to the Dales last month as Andrew Scarborough reprised his role after a 6-year absence, and has attempted to patch things up with various people after he faked his own death. It's been hard going, however, with former Flame Rona Goskirk stating that she was very much happy with Marlon Dingle and had no plans to rekindle their romance. Joe Tate, meanwhile, has attempted to reconnect with the man he once viewed as a father figure. Today's episode of the ITV soap began with Kim speaking to Joe over the theft of his car, further remarking that she spotted Graham talking with Kane Dingle in the pub. Thinking that Graham wasn't trustworthy, she urged Joe to test his loyalty. Joe instructed Graham to do a check of all the inventory present at Butler's farm, all with the aim of selling it off at an auction. With Kane currently struggling financially, Joe reasoned that he would have no choice but to sell. Graham headed to the farm to speak to Kane, though he and his fellow workers had their hands full with an ongoing problem. He resolutely said that he didn't have time to talk, but Graham shared that he would want to hear what he had to say. As Kane spoke to Sam, it became apparent that Graham had informed Kane of Joe's dastardly plan. Kane said that they would play him at his own game, adding that the main aim was to keep Joe away. Graham returned to Joe and Kim to inform them that there was little value in the farm's inventory, though Joe was already acutely aware of what they held. As he pondered why Graham was throwing him under the bus, Kim quipped that he was driving the bus. Joe later questioned Graham, though the latter maintained that he wasn't making a deal with Kane. Graham's game was seemingly up, however, when Joe provided the proof that he was lying. Joe subsequently remarked that he should have stayed dead. Kim echoed this sentiment, as it was made clear that she had contributed to Graham's downfall, leaving him with a bleak future as he seemingly has no friends and a growing list of enemies. When Graham first reappeared in the Dales, jaws dropped. Some thought they were seeing things. Others assumed it was a cruel joke. 6 years earlier, he had orchestrated his own death, a carefully constructed exit designed to protect himself from enemies who would have happily put him in a real grave. At least, that was how he justified it. But survival comes with consequences. He hadn't considered what resurrection would cost him. Rona Goskirk had been the first person he tried to make amends with. Their past was complicated, laced with passion and heartbreak. He thought perhaps time might have softened things. It hadn't. "I'm happy," she told him firmly, mentioning Marlon Dingle with a finality that left no room for negotiation. "I've moved on." The door wasn't just closed. It was bolted. Joe Tate, however, had been different. Joe had once viewed Graham as a father figure, a steady hand in the chaos of the Tate dynasty. When Graham returned, Joe's guarded expression cracked just enough to suggest hope. Perhaps here, at least, there was something to salvage. Graham should have known better. Seeds of doubt. It began with a car theft. Joe's car vanished overnight, and suspicion slithered through the village like smoke. At home farm, Kim Tate wasted no time stirring the pot. She had seen Graham talking to Kane Dingle in the pub. That alone was enough to raise alarms. Kim Tate did not believe in coincidences. She believed in leverage, loyalty tests, and preemptive strikes. "If he's back," she told Joe coolly, "it's not for sentimental reasons." Joe tried to defend him at first, but doubt is infectious, and Kim knew exactly how to plant it. The test. Joe devised a plan disguised as business. He instructed Graham to conduct a full inventory check at Butler's farm, livestock, machinery, equipment. Every asset documented. The ultimate goal was to push the farm into auction. Kane Dingle was already struggling financially. The pressure of mounting debts and dwindling resources meant he would have little choice but to sell. It was ruthless. Graham recognized the cruelty instantly. But he also recognized something else, a chance to do the right thing. The warning. When Graham arrived at Butler's farm, tension crackled in the air. Workers rushed about dealing with equipment failures and livestock complications. Kane barely looked up. "Not now," he muttered. "You'll want to hear this," Graham replied evenly. Moments later, away from prying ears, Graham laid it out plainly. Joe's plan. The auction. The calculated squeeze designed to force Kane's hand. Kane's eyes darkened. "Right," he said grimly. "We'll play him at his own game." The goal became simple. Keep Joe distracted by time, protect the farm. For the first time since returning, Graham felt useful. He wasn't manipulating. He wasn't plotting for personal gain. He was helping. But in the Dales, good intentions rarely go unpunished. The lie. Back at home farm, Graham delivered his report. There's very little value, he said calmly. Not worth pushing for auction. Joe studied him. Kim watched like a hawk. Joe already knew the farm's inventory inside out. He knew its worth. And Graham's assessment didn't add up. You're throwing me under the bus, Joe said quietly. Kim's lips curved into a thin smile. He's driving the bus. Graham held his nerve. I'm not making deals with Kane, he insisted. But the trap had already been set. The proof. Joe wasn't the naive young man Graham once mentored. He had prepared for betrayal. Security footage. Phone records. Witness statements. It wasn't difficult to piece together the truth once suspicion took root. When Joe confronted him, there was no shouting at first. Just disappointment. You lied to me, Joe said. Graham's silence was confession enough. I warned you about Kane. I gave you a chance. I wasn't betraying you, Graham replied. I was stopping you from making a mistake. Joe laughed bitterly. You don't get to decide that. Kim stepped forward then, satisfaction radiating from her posture. This is what happens when you invite ghosts back into your home, she said coolly. And then Joe delivered the blow. You should have stayed dead. Isolation. The words hit harder than any physical attack. For 6 years, Graham had survived in the shadows. He had built walls, justified choices, convinced himself that disappearing had been necessary. But standing there, stripped of trust and loyalty, he realized something devastating. He had no allies left. Rona wanted nothing to do with him. Kane would use him if it suited him, but never trust him. Kim despised him. And Joe, the one person who might have forgiven him, now saw him as a liability. Even the pub felt colder when he walked in. Conversations quietened. Eyes followed him. He was a living reminder of betrayal. Kim's final move. Later that evening, Kim made her position crystal clear. You faked your death, she said. You lied to everyone. Did you really think you could just stroll back in and reclaim your place? I'm not asking for power, Graham replied. No, she agreed smoothly. You're asking for redemption. And that's far more dangerous. She admitted, without remorse, that she had nudged Joe toward uncovering the truth. You're a risk, she concluded. And risks get eliminated. The message was unmistakable. He was no longer welcome at home farm. A bleak horizon. As darkness settled over the village, Graham found himself back where he started, alone at the edge of the dales. He had imagined rebuilding bridges. Instead, he had burned the last one. Faking his death had saved him once. Now it had condemned him. He thought of Rona's steady certainty, of Joe's wounded expression, of Kim's calculating smile. For years, he had prided himself on being the smartest man in the room. Now he wasn't even wanted in it. The question. The bleak future stretched before him like the moors, vast, uncertain, unforgiving. Could he claw back trust? Was redemption even possible? Or had he truly forfeited his right to a second chance? In a village built on grudges and history, resurrection isn't celebrated. It's scrutinized. And sometimes, the living are treated worse than the dead. As the wind whipped around him once more, Graham Foster faced a truth he had long avoided. Coming back was the easy part. Staying might be impossible.